So in the last video, we talked about how to find the consumer surplus, producer surplus, and deadweight loss in the presence of a price floor or a price ceiling. Okay, so I mentioned that these shapes here, these triangles, trapezoids, corresponded to various things: consumer surpluses, producer surpluses, etc. And I said that calculating them just amounted to finding the areas of the different shapes. Now, I realize that that's might be easier said than done. Okay, so in this video, what I want to do is I want to go through a numerical example to show you an example of how this could actually be done. Okay, so over here, we're given a little bit of information. We're given our reverse supply function, okay? P is equal to QS. Over here, we have our reverse demand function. Price is equal to 100 minus QD. And we're told that the government has imposed a price floor of 25. Okay, so let's graph this out. Okay, so what would our supply curve look like? Well, here we just know that P is equal to QS. In other words, this is the same thing as like a Y equals X situation, right? So it would just be an upward sloping line that passes through the origin, like that. That would be our supply curve, okay? And over here, P is equal to 100 minus QD. What would our demand curve look like? Well, of course, our demand curve would be downward sloping as expected, and its y-intercept, right, up here would be 100. Let's just extend that a bit. So that's 100, okay? It doesn't actually matter what this is, but I mean, it would also be 100, okay? But that actually doesn't matter for this video. Okay, so the first thing to do is find the equilibrium point. So what we're going to do in this video, we're going to find the consumer surplus and the producer surplus before the imposition of the price floor and after, okay? So let's start with before. Let's find the equilibrium point to begin with, right? And how do we do that? We just set these two equations here equal to one another, right? And we recognize that at equilibrium, QS is equal to QD. Okay, so we could write that 100 minus Q is equal to Q. Okay, now solving for this, we get that 100 is equal to 2Q. Divide both sides by 2. We get that Q is equal to 50. Okay, so this here, our equilibrium quantity, is equal to 50. And what would our equilibrium price be? Well, from this equation here, right, P is equal to QS, we can infer that our equilibrium price would also be 50. Okay, we now have all the information we need to calculate consumer surplus and producer surplus, right? So how would we calculate the area of this top triangle? Okay, well, the base is equal to this length right here, which is 50. Okay, so the area of the triangle is base times height divided by 2. Okay, so the base is 50. Height here would also be 50, right? From 50 to 100, that's a height of 50. Divided by 2. And this would be equal to 1,250. Okay, so we could write that our consumer surplus here is equal to 1,250. Okay, now what would our producer surplus be? Well, you'll notice that this problem is pretty symmetrical, right? You have, once again, base of 50 and height of 50, right? Or maybe base would be here in this case. So it's just 50 times 50 divided by 2 again. So our producer surplus is 1250. Okay, and that would mean that our economic surplus is just consumer surplus plus producer surplus, and that's just 1250 plus 1250, right, which is 2500. Let's see if this 2500 makes sense by just calculating the area of this entire triangle, right? This is just a way of checking our answer. We don't actually have to do both ways, but it why not? We have the time. So our base here is 50. Our height in this case is 100 divided by 2. And you'll recognize that 50 times 100 is 5,000, divided by 2 is indeed 2,500. So we've got that right. Okay, so that was relatively simple, right? Okay, now let's take on the slightly harder task of finding these values in the presence of our price floor. So let's just tidy this up. There we go. There we go. Okay, we are now going to impose a price floor. Okay, so keep these calculations here on the side in mind. Actually, you know what? Let's tidy this up and actually write out our results. So before price ceiling, consumer surplus equals 1250. Producer surplus is equal to 1250. So economic surplus is equal to 2,500. All right, so that allows us to just tidy this up here. Okay, now let's impose our price. Sorry, I kept saying price ceiling. Let's impose our price floor. Okay. Oh, you know what? This is a mistake. This should be price ceiling. I just wrote it wrong. Okay, sorry about that. So our price ceiling would be right here at 25. Okay, now let's just draw out what we know our consumer surplus will be, what our producer surplus will be, and what our deadweight loss will be. Okay, so we know that this here is going to be our deadweight loss. Okay, that this trapezoid here is going to be our consumer surplus, and that this little triangle here will be our producer surplus. So we need to find a few points. We already have this point, okay? So we need to now find this point and this point. And that's basically all we need, because we already have this point and we already have that point. Okay, so let's start with any one of these points. How do we find this point here? Well, the supply curve, right? So this is just the price of 25 on the supply curve, right? Our supply curve is just P is equal to QS. So this Q over here is also going to be equal to 25, okay? Now, at a quantity of 25, what would the corresponding price on the demand curve be? Okay, well, we just have to insert 25 into that equation, right? 100 minus 25 is 75. So this is 75, over here. And now we actually have all the information we need to make these calculations, okay? So let's start by calculating the deadweight loss, which is this triangle here. So what is this height? It's just 25 to 75, right? So that's a height of 50. So after price ceiling, that's a height of 50. What would be the base, or maybe this is the base and this would be the height. So what would be the height? Well, it's just 25 to 50, so it's just 25, right? So our height here is equal to 25, and our base is equal to 50. So deadweight loss is 25 times 50 divided by 2, which is 625. So deadweight loss is 625. We can now calculate our producer surplus, this triangle down here. Okay, so we've got a base here of 25. A height of 25. Divide that by 2. And we get 312.5. And last but not least, we have this trapezoid over here. So let's divide the trapezoid into two. We have this triangle here, okay, with a height of 25, a base of 25, okay, so that's 25 times 25 divided by 2, right? So our consumer surplus is 25 times 25 divided by 2, right? Plus the area of this rectangle here, right? So we've got a height of 50, base of 25, so that's just 25 times 50. And what do we get for consumer surplus? Well, 25 times 25 over 2 is 312.5 plus 25 times 50, which is 1250, for a total of Okay, so we have now our new deadweight. We have our deadweight loss, which is 625. Our new producer surplus, which is 312.5, and our new consumer surplus, which is 1,562.5. Now, the first thing we could do to check our answers is to just make sure that all of these add up to 2,500, right? Because if you add all of these up, you just get the area that we calculated in the first part of the question, right? So let's check that 625 plus 312.5 plus 1,562.5 is equal to 2,500. So I'm doing that on my calculator now, plus 312. So I have 1,562.5 plus 312.5 plus 625. And that does indeed give us 2,500. So we know that our calculations are correct, or at least that's good evidence that they are, right? And now, how else can we have done the calculation for deadweight loss? Well, we could have taken this 2,500, which is our previous economic surplus, and just subtracted 312 and 1,562.5, right? So let's do that, and let's see if that gives us 625, right? So, economic surplus 1, so this is before before price ceiling minus economic surplus 2. So this is after price ceiling, should give us our deadweight loss. Okay? So what was our economic surplus before the price ceiling? It was 2,500, right? So 2,500 minus, what's our new economic surplus, right? It's just our consumer surplus plus our producer surplus, right? Minus 1,562.5 plus 312.5. So let's actually calculate that. That's 2,500 minus 1,562.5 plus 312.5. That's 1,875. And that, of course, gives us 625. So we could have calculated our deadweight loss that way as well. So I hope that was helpful. If it was, leave a comment down below. If you'd like me to do more examples like this, like and subscribe if these videos have been useful to you, and share them with friends and classmates. And I will see you in next video.